Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, it takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon. And folks, please, leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? Today's first experience comes to us from out of Ohio, experienced by a sitting judge as a teenager. I'm about to share with you what happened when I was 15 years old. It was shocking and so terrifying that it changed my life forever, and the memory of it still lives with me, as if it had happened yesterday. It was the third week of August 1985. School would be starting soon, and I was training for the 10K race that was held every year for a festival in our town. I remember it was a hot August day with the temperature pushing close to 100 degrees. I was supposed to run 5 miles, but due to the high temps, I put off my running until evening. Running at night was not a big deal for me. I grew up on a farm in the country. I was not afraid of the dark. Often during my childhood, I ran around at night racing through the cornfields playing hide and seek. You name it, I was outside no matter what the hour. So the concept of going for a long run down a country road in the dark was not something I was fearful of. I had my route planned. I'd leave home, run down the ditch of State Route 4 for about 300 yards until I reached Temple Road, which dead-ended right into it. From there, I'd run down Temple Road until it intersected with State Route 98. This was the halfway mark. So from there, the plan was to turn around and just come back. Night came, it was around 10 p.m. and I headed out. There was enough moonlight to see, but it was definitely not a full moon. I got to the halfway mark at State Route 98, turned around and started to head back. There was not much along Temple Road, just cornfields on one side and soybeans on the other, with small pockets of trees dotting the landscape, and only a couple of farmhouses along that stretch of road back then. I was more than halfway done with my run, and it was going great. I was closing in on the crossroad, which meant I was only about a mile from Route 4. On my left, there was a pocket of trees, then the crossroad, which was flickering road. And on the other side of that, a cornfield that stretched a mile all the way to Route 4. On my right, just after the crossroad, was a field of soybeans, which too stretched a mile. It was at the wooded area where I sensed something was off. I don't know exactly how to put it, but I just felt like something was wrong. It was enough of a feeling that I stopped running. The warm evening air felt a bit cool against my hot skin, and as I stood taking deep breaths and looking around, I could not shake the feeling that I was not alone. Movement suddenly came from the cornfield near the crossroad. I snapped my head in the direction of the sound and looked, but with the corn standing at least 6 feet tall, I couldn't see anyone or anything. More sounds of movement came. This time, I saw the corn moving, and I could tell by how many stalks were being disturbed that whatever it was huge. This instantly jolted me with fear, but only because I was not expecting to hear something while on my run. My first instinct was to assume it was a deer. And why, you ask? Because we had a huge deer population in Ohio, and I couldn't imagine it being anything else. I pushed aside the initial fear and began to run again. Whatever was in the corn also began to run. What was odd was whatever was there was not running towards me, but was running with me, like through the corn and keeping pace with me. When I say pace, I mean it was running at my exact pace. I looked over at the corn and saw that whatever was running alongside of me was about 4 rows in from the edge of the field, making it impossible to see what it could be. I stopped again, turned and looked, hoping to catch a glimpse, but only grew more fearful, as it stopped as well the very second I did. I strained to see what it could be, but it wasn't moving an inch and was quiet. I knew then that this was unusual behavior for a deer. The air around me was still, not a breeze of any kind, but that feeling, the feeling was thick with a sense of dread. In the back of my mind, I knew deer did not act like this, but I assumed it had to have been a deer, although a very odd one, because what else could it be? Hoping to spook it, I hollered out, but nothing happened. Unsure of what else to do, I took off running again, and sure enough, it ran too. Freaked that it was again pacing me, I stopped, and it stopped. I was beyond concerned. I was terrified, my adrenaline was pumping, and my mind was spinning about what it could be. By the amount of corn I saw moving when it was pacing me, it had to have been bigger than a dog or a coyote, and I knew that there were no bears in this part of Ohio. As I went through the list of animals large enough to make such a disturbance in the corn, I only came up with nothing. I began to tremble. My heart was pounding, and the intense dread I felt was enough to make anyone go crazy. I was alone, engulfed by the darkness of the night, and something large was in the corn. I didn't know what it was or what was going on, but I did know that I wanted to get as far away as possible. I knew that I had 3/4 of a mile to go until I got to Route 4, and then a short few hundred yards to my house beyond that. I didn't know what else to do except keep running, but if I did, whatever it was would only keep pace with me. This meant I needed to change it up. I needed not to just run, I needed to run as fast as I could. I had to give it my all. I was confident in my abilities, as I was a good runner and pretty fast. As I inhaled several deep breaths, I concocted a plan to sprint about 300 to 400 yards, enough, I thought, to outpace and eventually put some distance between me and whatever the hell was in the corn, still being eerily still and quiet. I figured there was no way that this thing could see me because I couldn't see it. And with a fully grown corn being an obstacle, it would be a difficult time keeping up with me, or so I thought. I began a countdown in my head. As I ticked down, I readied myself for what I felt at that moment was a run for my life. I bent slightly at the hip, leaned in and tensed my body. Ready, set, go, I took off, like I was being shot from a cannon. For a split second, I felt like I'd be able to outrun this thing, but then I heard it. Like the other 2 times, it was pacing me. Whatever this thing was, it was keeping up with me, even though it had to blast through the corn to do so. I dug deeper and pushed harder. My pace increased, but it was not any good, as it just kept matching mine. If I went faster, it went faster. I could feel my heart pumping hard and fast. I was giving it all I had, but it was not enough. I covered about 300 yards, and I could feel I was done, gassed, out of steam. Unable to keep going, I stopped, and like before, it stopped as well. I now came to a horrifying conclusion that whatever was in the corn was not only faster than me, but there was no way that this was a person. There was then, and still is now, no one who could run through corn like that. I don't care if you brought in an Olympian track star. They would not be able to do it. It was impossible. I stood in the road, a deep feeling of defeat washing over my trembling body. I'd totally spent all of my energy trying to get away from this thing, and I had failed. I took my eyes off the corn, staring down that long stretch of road that I still needed to cover. I was scared, alone, and still had a good half-mile to go in order to reach Route 4. The only thing close to me was an old abandoned farmhouse, about 100 yards down the road and to my right. I recalled there had been an old tree in the front yard and quickly adjusted my plan. What I'd do now was carefully make my way there, climb to the top of the tree, and wait until morning. Armed with this new plan, I made my way to the tree slowly. With every step I took, this thing moved too. I made it to the tree, and the second I looked at it, my heart sank, as there was nothing to grab hold of. The tree had been dehorned. I could not climb that tree. It was impossible, and once more felt defeated. As I stood staring at the tree, a terrifying realization came to me. Even if I made it the next half-mile to Route 4, I'd have to turn left and possibly cross paths with whatever was there. I imagined making the turn and whatever it was, would come out and get me. I immediately pushed the fear out of my mind and focused on what I'd do next. I was not done yet. I was not going to just give up. I needed to keep going, but with going left not an option, I decided I needed to go right. And that was when it hit me. My good friend lived off of Route 4 in the opposite direction, which meant all I needed to do was make it to Route 4, turn right, and race down about 150 yards. I thought about making a run for his house across the soybeans, but quickly dismissed the idea, as I feared I'd get tangled in the soybean plants. No, I needed to keep pressing forward down Temple Road, but this time I'd go slow and conserve my energy for what I hoped would be my grand finale. A 150-yard sprint to my buddy's house. I was not going to waste another second and thought I pivoted and began my long march toward the intersection of Route 4. Each step I took was matched by the thing in the corn. In my mind, a fury of questions were flying around. Is this thing baiting me? Is it stalking me? Is it just messing with me? I didn't know what to think. All I knew was it still had not come out, but the fact did not give me peace of mind because at any moment it could. And there was no doubt in my mind that if it did, I'd be dead. Route 4 came into view as a car barreled down it, the headlights illuminating the area for a brief moment. I readied myself for what I knew would be the run of my life. Literally, more questions entered my already troubled mind. Would I look over my shoulder and see it? Did I want to look over my shoulder? Would it give chase? What was it? If I looked back, would doing so slow me down? Or would looking back and seeing something awful scare me to the point that I'd freeze? In a snap decision, I decided that when I took off, I wouldn't look back. I'd just hammer out the run and hope that it did not come after me. With less than 20 feet to go to the intersection, I picked my pace up, and of course it matched me. I looked to my right and over the rows of soybeans and did not see any traffic. I craned my head to the left and saw a glow of lights shining over the tops of the corn. A car was coming, and it posed me with another issue. Do I stop and wait? Or do I just make my move? I threw all the caution to the wind and took off full speed like I was coming out of the starting blocks for a 100-meter dash. I cleared where the corn ended to my left, which allowed me to see Route 4 clearly. Down the road, I spied a truck that was far enough away from me to safely cross. I had sworn that I wouldn't look back, but I could not resist. I craned my head over my shoulder, and right at that moment I saw something exit the cornfield and stop. I can't recall how long it looked at me, but it was long enough to get a good look. And all I can say is the first thing that came to my mind was the Egyptian god Anubis. I had no other frame of reference back then, nor was I aware of Dogman, much less of Bigfoot. All I knew was it walked out upright on its hind legs and stood at least 7 feet tall. I could judge its height because its head was taller than the corn. It had well-defined canine head, dark hair, and its build was similar to that of a greyhound, lean and muscular. It stood with its body postured like it was in a stance and its shoulders rolled forward. At the time, it reminded me of how a linebacker stood ready for the ball to be snapped. It turned its head and looked at me, but its stance and long arms positioned out in front of it, I presumed it was ready itself to pursue me. I faced forward and gave it all I had. I cleared the 100 yards with ease, cut across 1 yard, and came up to the boundary of my buddy's backyard. In front of me now was a chain-link fence, and I prayed that gate was open, but as I drew closer, I saw that it was closed and most likely locked. I decided in that instant that I would jump the fence. Now the fence was not that tall, but it was tall enough for me not to be able to hurdle it. I reached it, grabbed a hold of the top, which was just exposed, and jagged metal threw myself over. As I flew over, a sharp edge of the fence gouged my side. But I did not let that slow me down. I landed on the other side and could now see the swimming pool in front of me. I made a split-second decision and dove in, not thinking that it was the shallow end. My chest hit the bottom and I slid down to the deep end, which was about 10 feet. I rolled onto my back, exhaled all my air, pinched my nose, and looked up. I lie there, my body screaming with pain as my eyes darted around, looking for it to walk up and stare down at me in the pool. What must have been 30 seconds went by and nothing showed up. No towering figure, no shadows cast down on me in the pool. Had I made it? Did it not follow me? Unable to hold my breath any longer, I swam to the surface, quickly looked around, but didn't see it anywhere. I swam to the edge and crawled out. Frantic, I raced to the back sliding door of the house. I didn't know if it was locked or not. I grabbed the handle and pulled. The door flew open. I stepped through the vertical blinds that had been closed for privacy and into the house. What I didn't know was his parents were out of town, and he was not expecting anyone to suddenly appear, and yet here I was. My buddy jumped from his chair when I entered the living room. He wasn't just shocked to see me, he was also embarrassed. He had been watching the Playboy channel. He peppered me with a bunch of questions, all of which I answered the best I could with heavy breaths. I finally regained my composure and told him what had happened and what I had seen. At first he doubted me, assumed I had seen something like a deer. I wouldn't waver. I knew what I had seen. I knew what had just happened. Eventually he came around, and when he did, he too became scared. After agreeing for me to stay the night, we locked all of the doors and turned the lights out. The rest of the evening was spent walking around his house and peering out of the windows, half expecting to see this Dogman creature looking around outside. The morning came, and with it brought the sense of calm and relief. I had survived whatever that was, whatever I had seen, and I could not be any happier. My buddy took me home, and I immediately told my dad what I had encountered. I didn't know what to expect from him, but he quickly dismissed my story. He told me that because I had gotten spooked, my mind played tricks on me. Like I did with my buddy, I stood my ground and told him I knew what I had seen, and I did not imagine this. What's interesting, though, about my dad was that after my encounter, he never went outside at night without tucking a .38 pistol in the back of his pants. That told me all I needed to know. He did believe me. But by admitting it, he probably thought it would have scared me even more than I already was. I chalked up his dismissal as a way of protecting me. Much time has now separated me from that night, but the fear, that still remains in many ways. I've never run that stretch of road since, even during the daytime. I also never ran again at night anywhere. I still live in that area, and no matter when I venture out at night, I usually have a weapon with me, and I'm always on alert. Years later, I became aware of the term Dogman, and upon doing some research, I have no doubt that what I encountered that night was just that. I'm not afraid to tell anyone about what happened to me that night. I know what happened, and I know what I saw. My openness and transparency has no doubt resulted in some eye-rolling or thinking that I imagined it, but I have met others who believe. These believers had showered me with theories of that night. Some say that the Dogman has traits of a canine, those being that they run and hunt in a pack. They pointed out that maybe the one that had paced me was simply driving me to the others that were waiting. This thought has still sent chills down my spine. What if I had decided to make a run for my house? Would the one that exited the corn had given chase, or were there others just on the other side of the road in the cornfield? I'll never know, but it still gives me pause. I still don't know why it never came out of the corn before Route 4. Was it toying with me? I've replayed that night over and over again, and each time I imagine it coming after me. And what follows me is my demise. It was faster than I was, appeared much stronger, and without a doubt could have run me down and killed me, yet again it didn't. I don't know why it never came after me. I'm just happy that it didn't. To those who may doubt the existence of Dogman, I can tell you that they exist, and there is plenty of open and remote land for them to call home. To those who scoff at a story like mine, I say that history has shown us. For those who may doubt the existence of Dogman, I can tell you that they do exist, and there is plenty of open and remote land for them to call home. To those who scoff at my story, I say that history has shown us many tales of strange creatures, only for those creatures to eventually be discovered decades later by the scientific community. For me, it's only a matter of when, not if, Dogman are scientifically proven to exist. But if that doesn't happen in my lifetime, that's just fine. I know what I experienced that night. I know what I saw as it seared into my memory. So, as a warning to those who may have heard this, Dogman are out there, and if you're thinking of running late at night, don't. Alright guys, today's first video clip is a couple of guys are out going for a walk at night, and they see something in the woods. They really don't know what it is, and they go down to check it out. And what they come across is, well, something that looks like a crawler to me, if the video is real. I don't know. I wasn't there to take it, but I'm leaving it up to you guys to decide.
Dude, please don't go down there. Oh my gosh. Dude, hold on. Let me go first.
Alright guys, some really terrifying video footage. I don't know if it's real or not. That's why I'm not going to say what I think, but I'm going to let you guys decide. On to tonight's second encounter. A few years back, I had received some bad news that my mom had been diagnosed with lung cancer. Not hesitating, I packed my things and moved to a rural area east of Oklahoma City to help my brother and his wife care for my mom. I'm a registered nurse and figured my expertise could be helpful. I managed to get a job on a night shift at a facility about 40 minutes away. This enabled me to take my mom to her doctor appointments and chemotherapy during the day. My brother's house sat on about 3 acres with the closest neighbor nowhere in sight. The area itself was wooded and sparsely populated. Before I had my encounter, I had 2 other experiences that occurred which I believe may be connected. The first experience happened one night at around 9:30 when I was heading to work. I was driving towards town on Old Highway 66. There was nothing around but trees and an old abandoned gas station that is not designated as a historic landmark. I was focused on the road when suddenly a deer came racing across the highway in front of me. As a note, when I say highway, it's really just a two-laned road. The way the deer acted, it appeared they were running away or fleeing from something that was chasing them. I slammed on the brakes to avoid hitting them and came to a complete stop. My knuckles were wrapped in a white-knuckle grip on the steering wheel. My heart was thumping from nearly missing the deer. To my right sat the abandoned gas station. No other cars on the road. Just as I was about to take off, I heard a loud growl. I didn't know what to think. I looked, and it seemed to be coming from the gas station. Fear rose in me, not sure what I was hearing, but not wanting to stay around any longer. I sped off and got to work safely, but I was a bit shaken. I finally brushed it off and thought it was probably just a local animal. Coming from Colorado, we have big cats. So maybe they have something similar in Oklahoma, and the cat was chasing the deer. Days later, I was driving down that same stretch of road at night, when to my left I saw a pair of red glowing eyes. What was odd was they were very high off the ground. I was thinking to myself what it could be and instantly thought of that growl I had heard. I drove home without incident but felt the need to go back and investigate during the day to see if there was something there that might have been reflecting the light. I didn't find anything. Now some time had passed and I was at my brother's house. I had just gotten a new camera and hadn't quite mastered it. I went to the front yard, which was about an acre in size with a 6-foot fence around the perimeter. Something to note, the front door of his house is always locked. They never use it, as people come and go by using the kitchen door. I was in the front yard with my dog. There was a super moon that night. I was excited about the photographs I could get with my new camera. As I was snapping photos of the moon, I got a very bad feeling. It was enough that I decided to take my dog inside. I immediately went back out front and shot a few more shots. Eager to see some of the shots I had taken, I went back and sat on the front porch. As I'm scrolling through the pictures, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. I looked up, and to my shock, I saw a huge dog-like creature. It was on all fours, sniffing the ground. It was walking, so that I only saw its profile, and it ended up about 15 feet in front of me. I can't tell you how terrified I was. Here I was, the glow of my camera display screen shining on me, and there in front of me is this huge creature, covered in matted gray hair. It turned its head away from me and towards the moon, which was low on the horizon. The creature on all fours was over 4 feet tall, and it stretched from snout to tail at about 6. Its hind legs were huge, and its front legs or arms were covered in thick fur. The back was hunched. It reminded me of a hyena. Around its neck it resembled a lion's mane, as the hair there was thick. When it turned its head forward again, I could see a long snout and pointed ears. What was so shocking was how quietly this creature moved. It was almost gliding in a way. It took a moment, but soon the odor of wet dog washed over me. Sitting there, frozen in fear, I had no place to go. I had a camera in my hands, yet no power or courage to raise it. If I had, the flash would have gone off and exposed me. Fearing for my life, I kept perfectly still. Believe me, I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I just knew that if I did anything, I'd be risking my life. The creature lowered its head and again began sniffing the ground. It made some unusual sounds like grunting and movements that made it seem unnatural. It moved forward stealthily until it disappeared around the side of the house. I wanted to go inside, but the door behind me was locked, and the kitchen door was in the same direction this creature had gone. With no exit strategy, I went and hid behind a bench on the porch and prayed the creature wouldn't return. As I sat trembling from this encounter, I began to wonder what it was that I had just seen. Was it a dog? If it was, it had to have been the largest, most powerful dog I'd ever seen in my life. The only word that popped in my head was werewolf, because that was exactly what it looked like. I questioned how it didn't know I was there. It didn't make any sense that it hadn't seen me, much less smelled me. I know that dogs have a good sense of smell. Was it stalking something else? There are too many questions. 20 minutes or so went by, and I found the courage to head back inside. Carefully rounded the corner, but saw nothing. Back inside, I locked the house down and went to bed, although I did not sleep very well. The next day, I mentioned what I had seen to my brother. He didn't laugh it off. He simply said that there are big dogs around this area. I told him that this was not a big dog per se, but something huge, massive in size, much larger than any dog I had ever seen. I went to work later on and told some of my coworkers. Their response was typical of most, as they laughed and said I was crazy. I spent the next year at my brother's house living in fear of encountering this creature again. Thankfully, I had never seen it again. Since then, I have become obsessed with figuring out what it was that I saw, knowing that I am not alone. As others too have seen something very familiar, I feel vindicated that I'm not crazy or that I hadn't mistaken what I had seen. I've been asked if I'm grateful for my sighting, and I'd say I'm not, although I would see one again, but only if I were in a safe place, like in a tank. All right, guys, let's move on to tonight's final video clip of the night. Really quick, before we get into the last video of the night, this just popped into my head. That experience that the woman was talking about in Oklahoma, for some reason, the Anita Mears case popped into my head. The Newalla, Oklahoma woman who the police thought she had been stabbed, but she had been mauled by, then they said stabbed at first, then attacked by a pack of dogs, but in actuality, she was more than likely mauled by a huge Dogman, I believed. And I covered the story, actually the day it came out, back in April of 2022. It was an insane attack. But I pulled up the map, showed you guys what it was all about and where it happened and this and that. And it just really reminded me of that, instantly when I was starting to narrate it. I was like, whoa. I'm like, this is what she's describing just for some reason reminded me of that case. Anyway, one day I'm going to just sit down and go through all of the strange attacks and share them with you. Just because there's so many. I have at least 22 different files, maybe even more, on strange attacks that the local, state, and federal government cover up. Anyway, on to the video clips.
Look at his big head. Gray skin on the face. His cloaking hiding out very well. I gotta give him an offering. Look at this guy standing here. It's getting real intense right now. I'll leave him something. And I'll come back to it. Boy.
And there you have it, folks. This night-ending bonus. I do hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. And I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they are dangerous. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth. God bless.